You're listening to a Mamma Mia podcast.
Mamma Mia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Freedman. You're listening to No Filter, and I became a parent for the first time very unexpectedly. When I was 24, the guy that I'd started dating just a few months earlier knocked me up. But we were madly in love and we decided to just do it. We had 9 months to prepare to become parents, and during that time I read a lot and he didn't read anything. And we went to a couple of birth classes which had everything to do with birth and nothing to do with actually being a parent. We had precisely no conversations about the type of parents that we wanted to be. We did no tests, we got no character references or police checks, and I cannot overstate how little we knew about what we were taking on. I remember there was this moment when we left the hospital, I think most parents probably have this, when we couldn't quite believe that we were just allowed to take this baby home, when we had no idea what we were doing. And then we got home and we just put the baby on the floor in the capsule. We thought, what do we do now? The whole experience that we had could not be more different to what happens when you are a single person or in a same-sex relationship and you want to have kids. Not a single part of that process happens by accident. There aren't a lot of surprises, but there are a lot of disappointments and so much admin. To say that Remington and his partner, Alain, had to jump through a lot of hoops to become parents is a wild understatement. And I can't stop thinking about their first day as dads, which you're going to hear about shortly, because they didn't drive away from a hospital with a newborn, like most people. They went and picked up 3 primary school-aged kids who were siblings from temporary foster care and took them home. I have 3 kids, and like most parents, I got used to it in stages. They were babies, then they were toddlers. I had 1, then I had 2, then 3. But for Remington and Alain and other foster carers, it's a very different experience. 18 months ago, they brought 3 young siblings into their home, and overnight, this couple became a family of 5. So what's that like? Why did they want to foster instead of maybe have biological children of their own? And the thing I wanted to know most is, how do you open your heart knowing that it might be broken? Right now, more than 46,000 kids are in foster care across Australia. And do you know how many foster care homes there are? Just over 9,000. And if you're thinking that maths doesn't work, you're right. The number of active carers has gone down since the start of the pandemic, due in large part to the cost of living. And at the same time, the number of kids whose parents aren't able to care for them is rising rapidly. There are lots of reasons why kids end up in foster care: trauma, abuse or neglect, domestic violence, substance abuse. Sometimes the parents are just too young or simply can't afford to take care of their own children. And the stories of these kids can be heartbreaking, but also heart-lifting. You're going to hear one of those today. Remington, also known as Remy, joined me from his family home in Queensland. Enjoy this conversation. Remy, do you have a biological clock? Do men have biological clocks? I've never asked a man that.
I think so. And that's the whole reason we didn't have our own children, is because of my age. I'm coming into 48 this weekend, and everyone's like, why don't you get a baby? Why don't you get a baby? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Why don't you get an egg from America? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I don't think I can do that at 48. I can't have a baby. I don't want to be up at all night long at 3 a.m. and stuff like that. And also, I think women are built for that. Women and men are built differently, and women are built with that resilience to get up 5 times a night and not have a full night's sleep for weeks and weeks and months and months. Women are programmed for that. Men are not.
Oh, I disagree. I think you could easily do it.
I don't sleep much, so you're probably right. I'm probably good.
And it's also not what you're programmed for. It's just needs must. Like, if the baby's crying, you can't really say, you know what, I'm not a morning person.
Yeah.
Because the baby doesn't give a shit. The baby just wants to be fed.
We talked a lot about this, and I think we also wanted to have some type of communication. Hence, while we went for kids that were a little bit older, so you could communicate, because We could say what's wrong. Does your tummy hurt? Are you hungry? Are you
Yeah,
tired?
right.
You have that instant communication with someone. And just the fact that there are so many children in need of a home. If you really look at it like that, we really don't need to bring another child into the world for our life to be fulfilled. There are thousands of children that need homes.
So were you and Alain on the same page in terms of you both decided that having a biological child, was that the first
Yes.
thing that
Yeah.
you...
I think we were both kind of like, I think when you're in a same-sex relationship, you just do it. You're able to have a baby. So you get married or you get together and you can have a baby. It just happens. You get pregnant, 9 months, you pop the kid out and you just start life. Where we have options. We could adopt, we could do this, we could get an egg, we can get a donor, we could foster. There's all these options available for us.
It's interesting what you say in terms of you have a lot more options and you can get a lot more creative, but you have to be deliberate.
We talked a lot what our options were and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, when you start looking into it, when you start looking at the numbers, it was the best option for us.
So then what does that process look like? Did you look at adopting first? Did you think, oh, this is going to be so simple?
Well, we started this process in New South Wales. So we were in Sydney. We were living in a small unit in Bondi. We had friends that have gone through the system because in New South Wales, you could foster to adopt. That's an option. So that's what we were really looking at.
Can you explain what that means?
So you can foster kids. And then as time goes by, as the court cases go through, as things unfold, their parents may have passed. There are no other family members. Their parents can't get it together. There's drugs or alcohol that just can't repair themselves. They've had time and time and time, and the courts finally said, that's it. You've lost full custody. And then you have the option to adopt in New South Wales.
Did you look into just straight out adoption, not fostering first? Like, are there even any children that are still put up for adoption?
Yes, definitely, but that's another path. That's not through the government. That's not through the foster care system. That's through an adoption system, which still in this country is very slow and very long. And like I said, time was ticking. I didn't want to wait 10 years for that to happen. And again, we didn't really want a baby. We kind of wanted to skip and go to, child round 3, 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there. We were able to have that communication and that, that instant connection of talking and all that kind of stuff and verbal. So we didn't really look into that. Maybe my knowledge of that isn't that great because we really didn't go deep into that part of it. But I know the government still is so slow in that department. Very, very slow.
Why did you want to become a father?
Long pause. I think my childhood was great. My dad was very strict. And it took me a long time to break that old school German mentality, couldn't hug me, couldn't love me. I wasn't like that with my friends' kids because our friends had a lot of kids in Sydney. So we were around a lot of kids. And I was getting this connection with my friends' kids, this hugging, this loving, sleeping in my arms, saying, Remy, I love you. And me saying, I love you to them. And just being like, wow, there is a different way of raising children, of showing love and need. And it took me years to break that from my father's cycle of him not being able to say, I love you and not being able to hug me. It took me years. And I was like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be that kind of person. I want love and affection in my life. I want someone to look at me and say, oh, good job. I love you. And you're amazing and stuff like that. I just wanted that connection. And I think I did want it at a very young age. I did want kids very young. But looking back now, there was no way. I was in party mode for many years. I was in work mode. There's no way I would have been ready for children when I wanted them between 18 and really 35. There's no way. I was far too into the party scene, far too into the workaholic scene. There's no way. I was kidding myself back then if I thought I was ready for fatherhood.
That's so interesting. So you had to be shown that there was another way to be a parent or to interact with children that wasn't like a disciplinarian, strict way.
Yeah. And I think I really had to just grow up myself. I really had to be in a good relationship with someone that is respectful and brings out the good in me. And a good relationship. You've kissed enough frogs in your life to know when you've got the prince. I kissed a lot of frogs. And I really thought they were the one. But oh my God, no way. Looking back now, it would have been a disaster.
What was different about Alain that you knew that he was going to be a good dad?
I think the fact that right away we were having conversations about our future, about what we wanted in life. living together, being together, just all those conversations that I was always having with other partners, but they weren't having with me.
Ah,
You know, being young and wanting it and going through those breakups, and they're just like, oh, I'm just not into you anymore. Like there was nothing wrong with our relationship. It's just they weren't the one. And when you're not into somebody, it's okay. But when you're young, you just can't see that. And you're so blindsided about like, what was it me? Did I do something wrong? Did I not perform properly? Did I do this? Did I not do that? And it's like, you know what, Rem, just let it go. It wasn't the right situation.
so you started the process in Sydney, New South Wales, and then you moved up to Queensland.
Then COVID hit.
So what did that do?
So that meant everything was online. When this process starts, you'd usually go into an office, into whatever agency you decided to go with. You go into an office and meet and greet and start having a conversation with someone, and they start explaining how it works and yada, yada, yada. When you start entering the foster care system, there's not so much paperwork to do, but there is homework to do. You are having to go through courses. You have to go through all sorts of learning about children and different types of abuse and trauma. And you have to learn when a child is having a fit about a dinner, or is it PTSD from childhood trauma, all that kind of stuff explained to you in knowing all about child psychology. It's really quite interesting. I found that very fascinating, how they explain that all to you and how they go deep with you into child trauma and all that kind of stuff.
It sounds very different from birth classes where they kind of just explain the different types of drugs that you can take during labour.
They look into you, they ask for a police report, they talk to your friends, they speak to your neighbours, they speak to your colleagues, they come to your house, they look where the alcohol is, they look where the bleach is, they assess where the pool is it closed properly, they go through all of that stuff. And then, because we were doing it all on Zoom, when you're talking and doing all these courses on Zoom, usually, 9 to 5, they're all day long. You're doing these courses, and usually there's 4 or 5 people, up to 8 people on there as well. So there's a lot of people on Zoom. There's the educator, there's the Department of Care people, there's the government agencies on there, there's lawyers on there, there's all these people on there talking to you, teaching you law, teaching you all these process, asking you questions. There's also someone on there that's off screen, that doesn't have a camera on. It's a psychologist, and they're assessing you.
And do you know that, or you only find that out afterwards? You do know that?
You're told, yeah. But because their camera's not on, you do forget that they're there.
Do you get a report? Was it like, look, you were great, except for that time when you were looking at your phone instead of answering the questions? Or
you do. You get a final report that you can read through, and you have to agree to.
What you describe, over what period of time does it happen? Because I imagine a lot of people drop out during that time because it's just too hard.
Well, this is the problem. Because it was COVID, I think a lot of things were delayed. And I think the agency we were with in New South Wales, our friends that had gone through it seemed to go through quite quickly. And these were same-sex couples going through the same thing that we wanted, foster to adopt. And I don't know why things were taking so long. They seemed to be on us, being like, okay, can you get on the Zoom this Saturday and do a course? And then nothing for months. And then all of a sudden getting on us, can you do these courses? We need to do these next 2 courses pretty quickly. And then nothing for a few months. It did take a long time because of this agency you're with and maybe because of COVID, but it did seem to take longer than normal. I knew you were going to ask me this. And so I think if you were to do this course, and again, I think it differs between state to state and with different agencies and who you're going with, depending how fast you do the homework and all that kind of stuff too, because it sounded like a lot of the time when we were doing this, a lot of the people, instructors and teachers, really were quite impressed how fast we did the homework, how fast we had everything in. So it seems like that delays a lot of people having to fill out all those questions. And it's really quite repetitive. It's the same repetitive questions on what would you do in this situation? If a child did this, how would you react? If a child was in the bath, would you go answer the phone? If a child was having a fit in the middle of the mall, would you walk away? So it was quite repetitive, all these questions,
Remy, I feel like everybody should do these tests.
That's what everybody says when we talk about this.
Up next, the moment that Remy and Alain were told there was a family of 3 children that needed a new home. And we talk about what children go through in the process of moving into a forever home. We'll be right back. So you moved to Queensland, and did you have to start the whole process again?
So we did start in New South Wales. It was taking a long time. And then when we moved, we were living in a unit in Bondi. And we were both like, there's no way we're getting kids in a 2-bedroom unit. We've got to get out of here. We were already feeling squished ourselves in a 2-bedroom unit. And Bondi. I mean, you know Bondi. When you get married and you start having a nice marriage and you go to bed at 9 o'clock at night, Bondi's not the place to be because it starts at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So we realized we couldn't continue living in a unit in Bondi. There's no way we wanted to raise kids in a unit. There was no balcony. There was no backyard. I just knew from babysitting and seeing friends with parents, there's going to be groceries, there's going to be kids. We need a driveway. We were not doing this in an apartment. And after COVID, obviously rent had skyrocketed. And we were like, there's no way we're paying that kind of money for rent. We had been camping a lot during this time when the border had reopened. We'd been coming up to Queensland and camping and loving it, especially up in the Sunshine Coast area. We were like, oh, we'd really like to maybe end up here later in life. That'd be nice. We had to get out of the house and everyone's like, you guys want to go to Queensland? Why don't you go? And we were like, oh.
That was our retirement plan, but maybe we could bring it forward.
Yeah, all of a sudden lights go on in your mind. And I was a freelance hairdresser at that time. And I was able to kind of choose where I wanted to work and all that kind of stuff. And at the time, Edwards & Co. was going to be opening up in Noosa. And so I was like, great, well, I could work out of Noosa if we're going to be based in Sunshine Coast. And so I said to Alain, will you speak to your company? And if, they say you can work remotely, then we'll do it. And they said yes. And we were like, okay, we're moving. And just boom, ended up here. So going back to your question, no, you can't just move your file to another state or another company and start all over again. That's what we were told in New South Wales. So our dream of doing all that kind of fizzled. We were distracted with the move, but as soon as we got up here, we found a nice big house. And Alain was like, you know what? Come on, let's look into this some more. And he called around and he was like, come on, I found Angle Care. They seem really great. They want to meet us right away. We went into the office, met them. It was just instantly a really nice interaction with Angle Care and us. They were very excited to meet us. You could really tell, I don't want to say desperate, but I could really tell that they needed help. You could really tell. And then when you start learning about it, learning about the kids and realizing that there is over 12,000 children in care in Queensland that need homes. There are 12,000 kids that need homes. 12,000 kids living in group homes. There are kids living in hotel rooms. 5-year-old children living in hotel rooms and being picked up every day by child safety and driven to school because there's no home for them. So when you start finding out statistics like that, you really realize that you're doing a good thing. We found this out later, why they were so excited to meet us, because we had a 4-bedroom house. We had 2 cars. We had jobs that were flexible. We were both on average incomes. So we are the golden package for them. They are like, they just don't get that very often. They get people that have a spare bunk bed in their house, someone with 1 room that could take 1 child. And you've got these families of 2, 3, 4 children that have to be separated because people don't have enough space for them. So it happens all the time that these children are separated. With us, I think that was the big thing with the kids that we have. I know for a fact that if these kids were separated, it would have broken them. It would have broken them.
Remy, when was the first time it was raised with you, the idea of taking more than 1 child? Because is that what you were thinking as you had embarked on the process before?
The reason I'm laughing is because a lot of our friends had 3 kids, girl, boy, boy, and all same ages. So we were around that a lot. And I loved it. I saw the dynamic with these families. I saw the love. I saw the craziness. I loved how it worked. But we really were talking about 2 children. We were like 1 child, 2 children. That's really what we were kind of looking for to start our family and stuff like that. And I always said to Alain, oh, but you don't know. If there's a family of 3, we can't say no. And he was like, Rem, don't be silly. Remington, stop that. And I was like, oh. And so going back to what happened with Angle Care, we met them. They were very happy to meet us. They spoke about what we need to do. You need to do this, this, and this. And we were like, oh, we've done that already. They're like, oh, you have? And we're like, yeah, we explained the situation in New South Wales, and they were told that we can't move the file and all that. They were like, oh, no, we'll speak to them and we'll see where you're at. And they're like, okay, so it looks like all you have to do is this course on Saturday and another course on Saturday, and you're done. And we were like, oh my God, amazing. This is great. We did the course on Saturday. We did the second course on Saturday. We finished the course. They sat down with us and they were like, so Alain, Remington, we have a family of 3 that we think would be really good for you.
Wow.
So Alain and I just laughed. We're like, oh my God, and like had this inside joke going, which we then had to explain to them why we were so concerned and laughing, why they said 3. We're not, because we can't handle it, blah, blah, blah. So they were like, oh, is that okay? And I have to say, I can't speak for everyone, but I know in our situation, when they explained the three and what they've been through and what they're going through, there wasn't really any red flag there for us. There wasn't any severe trauma that they flagged with us. So that was a concern. There are certain things that you have to know what you can and cannot handle. And they go through that process with you and they ask you a lot about what you can handle. What would you handle in this situation? What if there was sexual abuse? What if there was physical abuse? What if there was neglect? What if there was food neglect? All these different forms of child neglect and abuse they go into, and you have to know what you're prepared to handle. You can't just have his children for a week and be like, "Whoa, this is hectic. No way. No, take them back." You really have to commit to what you're getting into.
Are there any kids in the system who aren't traumatized?
No.
Because I assume if you've got no parents to look after you.
No. Think about it.
Bad stuff's happened to you, right? If you're in the system and you're needing to go and live with strangers, essentially, bad shit's happened.
Yeah. There's so many different forms of why children would have to go into the system. Why would that be removed from their house? It could be a simple thing as there's only one parent and that parent loves the children, but maybe they're 18 years old or 15 years old and they're just not capable of looking after a child. They love this child, they're trying their best, but they can't maintain a life and work and children, and they don't mean to, but the kid starts to go without food and is being left alone, and everyone's in a different situation. I have to say, what I found really fascinating about this whole process, and I've got empathy. I've got a lot of empathy. I care a lot. I care too much probably sometimes, but I have empathy. But when you go through this foster care system, they really want you to have empathy. Empathy for the parents, which I thought was, of course I would. I already thought about that. I already thought about meeting the parents and what our situation would be like, but I have empathy. Not everybody really realizes what empathy means when you go down this road. They really taught us about empathy, and they really go deep with you about understanding empathy and understanding what these parents have been through. Not judging them, because you don't know what these parents have been through. You don't know what kind of childhood these parents have. Yes, you understand the children, you get a file, they kind of discuss what's happened and what's going to happen, the courts and blah, 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 but you don't have a file about the parents. You don't know what they've been through, what kind of situation they grew up. Did they grow up with alcohol? Did they grow up with drugs? Did they grow up with abuse? Is there intergenerational trauma in there from any kind of history background like that? So they really teach you empathy for the parents. Don't judge them. And everyone's situation is different. We are involved with the parents. We do see them. We do have contact with them. They're nice people. They really are. They are good people. And just, unfortunately, life throws curveballs at you and you get derailed and shit happens. You're not a bad person.
What were you told about the kids?
We were told that they were moved from their home. They were in care. They've been in care for about 10 months at that point.
And what does it mean to be in care? Where were they living and under what sort of circumstances? As much as you can tell us.
They were with foster care. They were with a lady who was doing an amazing job. I am just pausing because I can't go into too much detail because it is their story and I can't divulge too much about the children's story for legal reasons, and also because that's their story. I can't speak on their behalf and stuff like that. Their carer was doing an amazing job. She had multiple children of her own, because there's all different categories of being a foster carer. Like my aunt's a carer up here, and she's 80, and she lives alone, and she looks after a 10-year-old boy on Tuesday. She picks him up from school. She brings him home. She spends 4 or 5 hours with him, teaches him things, gardens with him, builds things with him, has dinner with him, and then drops him off. He is not with his parents, only because his parents are quite young. They had 3 children, very young, obviously could not handle it, life and working and raising 3 children. So their children is with another family member, the grandmother, who's much older, and she's caring for all 3 children. And she's struggling. So my aunt is respite care. And so she does that once a week on Tuesdays, and she's there for this little boy, and he's lovely. I've met him. I kind of know his story. And I don't think there's a lot of trauma there. I think when she does talk to him about his parents aren't bad people. They're just a couple that had children very, very young and don't make enough money and can't look after 3 children. Things like that. There's a lot of scenarios. That's one of the probably easier scenarios. And then there's some really heavy scenarios where there is severe sexual abuse and severe mental abuse and physical abuse that's going on with these children.
On the spectrum of, say, that 10-year-old boy to the severe forms of abuse, Do the kids that you foster, do they sit somewhere in the middle of that spectrum?
Yeah, I can say that the kids that we have, I think when we started talking about it and when they told us their story, we definitely said, okay, yeah, this is something we are capable of looking after. So that's definitely happens very quickly early on in the process. They explain things to you.
After that first meeting to the day you picked them up, how much time elapsed?
I think there was about 2 months there.
And what did you do in that time?
We went to Fiji.
It's like a baby moon.
Because that was already pre-booked.
You're allowed to have a holiday. You're about to do a hard thing.
Let's do this international trip now while we have money and while we have time. So we did go to Fiji. And then leading up to that, basically, you have a meet and greet with the children. It'll be in a playground area where they meet you in a very public area. And you meet them. There's a chit chat, a play date. And then every child's different depending on when they're going to be told what's happening. And so I guess at that point, when we first met them at the house, they did know that they were going to come stay with us, that their time with this care was up. And the only reason why she couldn't care for these kids was just because she had kids of her own. There was a lot going on, and it was supposed to be temporary. And obviously, the court order had been extended, and it was going to be for a longer period of time. And she just reached out and said, I can't. Because there's 4 children in our family, and she does have their 4th child, who's a lot younger.
Okay. When you were told about these kids, what were you told about the trajectory of this relationship? That you would be able to adopt them, that it would likely be?
Nah, early on, it was still an open police investigation and still an open court case. So there was still a lot of stuff they couldn't tell us. You have to go into that realizing that there's a lot happening behind the scenes. There's a lot happening with child safety, with angle care, with the department, with the lawyers, with the court system, with the police department. There is so much happening behind what's going on. You don't have control over that. And you have to realize that. And I really thought Alain would struggle more than he has because he's Swiss. So he's a control freak and he likes things very, very organized. In Switzerland, the train runs on time. It's not a minute late, not a second late. So I really thought he would struggle, but he's actually adapted very well to all of this.
Most people meet their children for the first time in a hospital room. But up next, Remy tells me a very different story about the first time he and Alain met their children.
And we got there and they were in the pool and they were like, hi. We'll never forget those 3 wet little faces staring up at us. And it is just an incredible moment.
Stay with us. Tell me about the first time you met them.
Yeah, it's... I might cry. I think we both had a cry before we got out of the car. You pull up to this house and you realize that you're about to meet these 3 children that know about you and that know they're going to come live with you. And you're just like, oh, this is fucking weird. Like, this is so just not normal, you know? Like, what are we about to do? We both looked at each other and had a hug and a kiss and we're like, okay, you ready? You know? And you get out of the car and you just knock on the door and you just don't know what you're going to expect. Everyone says to us, oh, these kids are so lucky to have you. But I'm sorry. We are lucky to have these kids in our lives. What they've done for us, what they've done to our relationship and how they've opened our eyes to what families look like and stuff like that. It's been a blessing. It's been an absolute treat to have them with our lives. So it was a big, like, holy shit, here we go moment in the car. And we get out and you knock on the door and she opened the door and welcomed us in and the kids were in the pool. It was actually their birthday that day. 2 of them had the same birthday. It was actually their birthday that day. So we brought presents, I think, which was a great icebreaker. I mean, what kid doesn't love presents? And we got there and they were in the pool and they were like, hi. We were like, hi. And just, I think that we'll never forget those 3 wet little faces, those big, beautiful eyes staring up at us. And it is just an incredible moment, you know? You're just like, they're beautiful children and they're just, it could have gone in so many different ways, you know? They could have been ran to their room. They could have taken off. They could have been weird about it. They could have been scared. They weren't. They looked at us with these big eyes and beautiful faces and smiling. And were just excited to meet us. And I think within 5 minutes, we were in the pool with them jumping around. They were jumping on our back. We were playing Simon Says, or whatever that game is.
Marco Polo.
Marco Polo. Marco Polo. And they were on our shoulders and wrestling and play fighting and strangling me. And it was great. Yeah. I don't think we realized until that moment, what's this going to be like meeting these kids for the first time?
What had they been told about you, Rem?
Not that much. I think their care was very close to them. She really loved them and didn't really want to let them go because she had all 4 kids. She still has the youngest child in their care. He does need full-time care because he has special needs. So that's why we didn't get him. I mean, the system wouldn't give you 4 kids right off, especially one that needs full-time care, that has special needs. They wouldn't do that to you right away. I mean, 3 kids was a stretch for them. I know there was a lot of deliberation behind the scenes about can they handle it? But I think going through that whole system and going through all of that and going through the psychology process and having a 4-bedroom house, we had the room, we had the capability, we had the flexibility. And so that played a lot into the decision to give us care of 3 children.
Was being a same-sex couple ever a barrier?
Nah. And I realized later on why they were so excited to meet us. They love same-sex couples. Maybe because we can't have our own children, we are definitely maybe a lot more on tune of what kids need or something, or maybe we're just are going to try a lot harder. I don't know what it is. And then, you're basically a celebrity when you walk into this office. We walk into the office and they're like, the boys are here. The boys are here. Oh my gosh. Oh. And then everyone's coming out and saying, oh, hi, Alain. Hi, Remington. Nice to meet you. Oh, we're so excited to have you. Oh, blah, blah. Just because they just don't have enough carers. I mean, this is why I wanted to come on the podcast with you and why I do all the media with Angle Cares, because we really want to get out there that anyone can do this. It doesn't matter if you're single, if you're same sex, if you're 20 years old, if you're 70, 80 years old, it doesn't matter. What matters is you like children, you've got the time, the flexibility, and if they are going to be staying with you, you've got a bed. That's really what comes down to it.
So after you met them in the pool on their birthday, what happened next?
It was their birthday, obviously, so we exchanged the presents and that broke the ice very quickly. And they said, okay, well, when are we coming to stay with you? So I think there might have been another carer before this last care, but it was only brief. And they had met a lot of people by this point because there's a lot of people involved in this. There's a lot of officers. There's a lot of child safety officers. There's a lot of the carers, us as carers. We've got people that are on our behalf with Angle Care. We've got child safety officer working on our behalf. We also have a child safety officer for the children. You also have an independent child safety officer that is independent and makes sure that the children is being looked after and it has a voice for the children. You also have the parent safety officer working on behalf of the parents. So there's a lot of people involved.
It really is a village of administration.
I think that's the only negative thing I can really say about this whole process is we have gone through a lot of child safety officers. I will say that that's probably been the only negative thing is we've had the children for over a year now, and I'd say we've had 7 different child safety officers in a year.
Is that because there's a high rate of burnout?
No, they get moved around in the department, it seems. Yeah, they're not leaving, which really infuriates me when you think about it because these children need stability. They need to be dealing with the same person, in these situations.
Of care, yeah.
And here you are, we have one child safety officer for a week. And so when you get a new child safety officer, they have to come to the house, they have to see the house, they have to meet you, they have to meet both of you. You have to take time off work for that. You got to pull the kids out of school, you got to meet the kids, go through all that. So, that's a lot of people they're meeting. It's a lot of people.
When did they come and live with you? What was that first day like?
So what happens really is you meet them, you have a couple play dates, then you have a sleepover. They come to the house, 1 night sleepover, then they go back. Again, every situation is different. Then a couple nights go by, then they come over for a 2-night sleepover.
It happens gradually. Well, for you, it happened over a period of time.
Yeah, it was a few weeks. Yeah. I do know the system in New South Wales was a bit different with our friends that did it. I know that their system was a bit different. I know that they had to be there early in the morning before the children woke up. So they were in the house when the children woke up, and then they had breakfast, and then they came another night when the children went to bed. So they were before bedtime. So they kind of introduced that way, which actually works quite well as well too for the children. I guess it also depends on what age you're dealing with as well.
What did you have to buy? It's kind of like just add
Everything.
Water, like an instant family.
We went from nothing to everything. Because we did start this process in New South Wales, we were getting ready back then. So we bought bunk beds, we had dressers, we had a few clothes. We had all that stuff already. And they come with a lot of stuff too. They come with clothes and toys and stuff like that. So yeah, we probably bought too much stuff. And they tell you, don't spoil the children. I think that was a learning curve for us, taking the kids to Target and letting them choose a toy. Wow.
Or 5.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously, they had no idea about budgets. $20 budget, pulling out a toy gun for $90. And so, when, of course, we were like, oh, yes, you can have that. Yes, you can have that. Yes, you can have that. Yeah, I didn't do that again.
Tell me about your relationship and the relationship that the kids have with their biological parents.
Again, every case is different. And it also depends on the court order. Sometimes the parents are not involved because of physical abuse or all sorts of things. In this case, the parents are involved. The idea was to get these kids back home. So it was temporary for us. And so that was fine. And really, again, there's so much happening. You're not told that much.
But you're told going in that the idea is to get these kids back with their parents. Is that always the idea? I know you can't generalize, but is that the sort of the default, is to have kids back with their biological parents?
Yes. Ideally, best pace for children is to be with their mother and father. That's the fundamental way they're going to develop better in life, is to be with their parents. But in some situations, if it's not safe, you can't have children in that situation, and you got to pull them out.
Remy, you say that, but like, how do you open your heart knowing, it's like going into a relationship knowing at the beginning that someone's going to break up with you? This is different. But how do you build that grief into opening your heart and all the love?
Things change because New South Wales, they foster to adopt. And in Queensland, they don't do that. They foster. At the end of this, if the courts decide that they can't go back home, then you become the permanent carers. They still are children of the government. The government is liable for them, but everyone steps away. So child safety, all of Anglo care, everyone steps away, and you can start to make decisions on your own. And because we have to have meetings every week or two, coming to the house and assessing things and stuff like that. So that all kind of goes away. Pros and cons, because the government is still financially liable for them, you do get financial support till they're 18. So you do get looked after financially, which, as you know, having children is a big help, and it's great.
So what do you hope for in your heart? That must be really hard, because if you believe that the children ideally should be back with their biological parents, but you, I imagine, love them and would like them to stay with you, like, how do you navigate that?
Sorry. I think it's been over a year now, so you do become very close to them. I think with me, I can't speak for Alain, but I know I've got a bit of resilience, I think, when it comes to having these connections with children and separation. Coming from Vancouver, I had a lot of friends that had kids, and then I left. And I came to Sydney. I was in Sydney for 23 years. A lot of my friends had kids. I had a great connection, and then we left. So I think in me, I do have that built into me, that strength of having a connection and then separation. So I went into this knowing that if that was a possibility, I could handle it. Obviously, by the tone of my voice, things have...
Sounds like you're handling it great.
Things have changed. I know Alain is struggling a bit, maybe, if they do go back home, but you just don't know. You don't know. Half of me really believes the best thing for children is to be with their parents. And I really hope things can get better with their parents and things go good. At this point, we're not too much in context, so we don't know really what's going on. We are really just waiting for things to be told to us. And then the other half of me is enjoying this family life we have of getting up and having breakfast and getting dressed and school drop off and going to work and then racing to school pickup and then getting home and doing homework and then doing dinner and then yeah, and again, going from 0 to 3 is a lot. But I think because Alain and I talked about it for so much and we knew we wanted to have children, we were ready. We were so ready. We were just waiting. I mean, the months leading up to getting the children, I can't tell you how times we sat dinner silent, staring at each other, bored. Yeah.
I imagine it's not too quiet at the dinner table these days.
No, it's not. It's not.
Are there any limits on what you can do with the children and the decisions that you can take as their foster carers?
Yes, and again, every case is different. It all depends on court orders, stuff like that, medical stuff like that. If the child falls at school and breaks their arm, we can say yes to getting a cast. If the child needs surgery and screws, I think at this point, it still has to get parent approval. And if we can't
Wow.
get a hold of the parents, then I think child safety has the authority to say yes to an operation. In a hospital, certain medication and surgeries, stuff like that, still have to have approval from parents. Well, I think they have the right to say something, but if we can't get a hold of them, then child safety can make the decision on their behalf.
What about travel?
Within Queensland, no problem. We can go camping, yada yada. Again, it depends on the situation. With the situation right now we're at right now, the parents do have weekly visits, 1 day a week for a supervised visit with child safety for a couple hours. And that's set in court. That has to happen. But if we want to go away on holiday for a week, we can ask that date to be moved forward or back so we can have 7 or 8 days of holiday. When we wanted to go to Sydney in January to visit all our friends, that was a 5-month process with the courts and child safety to get approval for that because we were getting their ID. And when we get their ID, there is worry that once we have their ID, we can apply for passports and leave the country. So they have to watch out for that. We've heard stories of people wanting to go overseas, and you can apply for a passport and take the child overseas, and you do have to read the court requirements. If there's visits with the parents, those will be done via Zoom and all that kind of stuff. So it depends. They're very flexible.
Do they ask about their future much? Do they ask to go back to their parents, or do they ask how long they're staying with you?
They don't really ask time. Children don't really understand time. Obviously, situations change now. It's becoming longer. I know the court date was last Friday, and we haven't heard yet. So we're just waiting to be told what's happening with that. Sorry. Yeah.
I can't imagine what it must feel like to have so much love and so much responsibility, but no power or control.
You learn. I could definitely say now that we've had the children for over a year, watching them grow physically, mentally, their health improve, their attendance improve at school, their schoolwork improve, everyone saying to us how good they're doing, the psychologists saying everything's going great, child safety, the school teachers. When you start seeing that and when you start seeing them develop in that way, you realize it doesn't matter what happens. What happens right now is amazing, and they're doing so well. And yes, if they do go back home, that's fine. You may not hear from them after that again, but you probably can expect a phone call in a few years saying thank you, maybe from one of them one day. You just never know. Every situation is different. But Alana and I have discussed it, and if they do go back home, we will do this again.
How are you different as fathers? What's your parenting style like?
Good cop, bad cop. No, sorry. Well, not good cop, bad. He's more strict, I'd have to say. He's definitely more strict, which I thought was a problem because, kids in care and a bit of trauma and stuff that might have happened in the past. But you know what? They respect him more than me. They respect his car more than mine. They won't eat in his car, but they'll put gum on the floor of my car.
I'm the you parent.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how that's happened. Maybe because I'm softer and I've got that empathy card and I just, it's okay,
What has surprised you most about having these kids in your life?
Just the difference you can make, especially when you get involved in this system, in these agencies, and when you start hearing the statistics and some of the carers out there, what they're like and how they treat children. It's appalling as well. So not only have some of these children been through hell, they go through hell again with some horrible foster care that is abusive and has a bad place for them to stay and food and all that stuff. So not everyone's good. They do get caught out eventually. Some people do it for the money, and they do get caught out eventually as well too, because the children do get interviewed privately, with psychologists and through child safety. So things get flagged pretty quickly when you're not looking after children. But yeah, I can't stress to anybody out there that's listening to this and that has any love for children and that thinks that they can't do it, you can do it. If you've got extra time, again, you could be an hour a week. It'd be a couple hours a week. It could be on the weekend. They need emergency care. So it could be just a Friday, Saturday night until these kids get placed somewhere. There's so many options out there. Really look into it. Go to any agency out there and speak to them. Just sit down and go in. You don't have to say yes when you go in there. Just go in there, have a meeting with them, ask them questions, ask them what it details, what it looks like, all that kind of stuff, and just get the answers. Anybody can be a carer. That's the biggest thing I've been surprised by is people that are older than single, that are 55 and be like, oh, do you think I could do it? Yes, of course you can. Same-sex couples. Oh, you think I can do it? We're same-sex. Yes, of course. Just anybody. If you've got the love, you've got the time, that's all you need. That's all you need. And the patience with child safety.
What a story, hey? I hope that's made you think differently about what fostering means. I had no idea that there were different types of fostering that you could do. I knew that it was easier now for same-sex couples to foster, but I didn't know that you could foster children as a single person, or that you could be older or younger and maybe have them part-time. If you're interested in learning more about fostering a child or children, most states have different organisations and slightly different policies. So we're going to pop a few links for different organisations in our show notes. As I said, ideally you should be over 25, but some states allow even younger. You don't have to be in a relationship. You can be single or married. You can have kids of your own, or you can have no kids. So many options, so many kids needing a home. The way I heard about this story is that Remy is a hairstylist, and he was working in the same hairdressing salon that I go to all the time. It's called Edwards & Co. And I've seen his beautiful smiling face over the years that I've been going there. He's done my hair a few times. And recently I was there getting my hair cut, and I asked where he was. And my hairdresser told me that he'd moved to Queensland with his husband and that they had just fostered 3 kids. And immediately I wanted to know everything. So I reached out, and that's how this interview happened. Now we have a little bit of a postscript to this story. We reached out to Remy to check whether they had any news. And he said that all the departments have met and agreed that permanent placement with us is their recommendation. And the magistrate will have final say, but it's looking good. This episode of No Filter was produced by Kimberly Bradish and Gia Moylan, with sound production by Leah Porges. I'm Mia Freedman, and having children in my life is hands down the best thing I ever did. Highly recommend. 5 stars.